Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosi-Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome back to MOTS. Tonight we are discussing The Martian, recently released. I, of course, am Scott Thurlow, as always, here with Stephen Amosi.
Hello.
Beth Morgan.
Hello.
Chris Morgan.
We're going to MOTS the shit out of this movie.
And Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Is there life on Mars?
We'll find out
No.
shortly enough. So, who would like to give the synopsis number one of The Martian?
I will. So, pretty much this movie is about an astronaut who gets marooned on Mars by the rest of his crew, miraculously survives a freak sandstorm that comes up, and it's all about him struggling against the elements of a planet that is basically just trying to murder him. And, you know, it goes a lot into what's going on Earth while this is happening and their attempts to save him. A lot of it actually takes place from his perspective on Mars, trying to basically keep himself alive long enough to be rescued. So I think that's a pretty decent synopsis, right?
That covers it. Who would like to give the funny logline synopsis of this movie?
Will McAvoy wants you to join NASA.
And I've got another one. In the NASA, you could be a cool nerd.
Yep.
All right, so let's start off. Stephen, you will start the introduction. Hit me.
Absolutely. So this movie begins with a crew of the Ares 3 mission to Mars. This is the supposedly third mission to Mars. We don't really know that in the beginning of the film. It just kind of starts.
It's supposed to be a
with
given,
them
I suppose.
on Sol, which is day whatever of the mission. What was it? 16?
16 or 18, something like that.
Oh, yeah, it was 18.
They've been there for 18. That's right, because he wakes up on the 19th day. Sandstorm comes up out of nowhere. They abandon the mission. Matt Damon's character, Mark Watney, gets nailed with a piece of debris and is left for dead, basically. I think that the intro basically ends off even before you realize that he's still alive when the rest of the crew blasts off, gets off the planet, and begins their ride back to Earth.
I'd agree. I think when he wakes up is the moment that the main story
The body begins, yeah.
Well, because Jeff Daniels' character, Sanders, he announces that, Mark Watney died. And then it really does set up the movie, right there. So I agree with you. When he wakes up, that's the end of the intro.
Mm-hmm.
On the intro, though, I was kind of bothered a little bit, not too much, at how quickly it happened. Like, you are introduced to these people, and they do a good job of, like, establishing Matt Damon's character and his banter with his fellow crew members. But they've been on Mars, you see them doing a couple little experiments, and then all of a sudden, shit happens. I felt like I had so little time to get to know any of these characters before the ball starts rolling of the narrative.
I agree with that somewhat. I think what you want to say is felt a little bit rushed. And, like, yes, I kind of got that sense, but this may not be completely fair. I think a number of us, except for you yourself, sir, have read the novel. So that pretty much is how it starts off. So I think it was true to that because I read the novel. But I agree in the sense that in the film itself, it felt, you're like, thrust into it a little, more quickly than perhaps there was enough time perhaps to get settled in before that happened. I see what you mean.
I
agree somewhat to an extent. Good.
I actually don't have a problem with that personally because, it really was kind of a teaser. It's kind of like, here's the situation, here's a crisis, here are these people, kind of see you on the other side.
One of my issues is that a huge subplot of this movie is the connection between Matt Damon and his fellow crew members. And in a sense, it's a lot of being told that they care about each other, but little of their interactions. And again, yes, you have it throughout of them like mourning his loss, and when they get reconnected, you don't see you get maybe 2 minutes of them interacting before they're separated.
Yeah, I get it. I see what you're saying.
I didn't feel like it was that rushed because I felt like they put you there right like in the middle. You saw how they related to each other. You didn't really need it spoon-fed to you that like, oh, I like this person and he's my best friend and this person I really like. I felt like I actually enjoyed the fact that they didn't go too much into it because, well, like Scott just said, the book kind of starts, I think, even later than the movie. I don't think you even get that big intro in the book. But it just starts like when he wakes up.
Books and like movies are completely different.
Right, but I get kind of annoyed when I feel like they're just spending so much time setting up the relationships when I'm fine just buying the fact that there are relationships here. They've been a crew together for months before they even got to Mars, obviously on the ship.
Yeah, and I mean, a big rule of storytelling that you hear over and over again is, start the story when it starts. Don't, spend a lot of time doing backstory, because you can
do that later.
Put that in throughout your story. And I think that's what they were trying to do, basically saying there wasn't a lot that happened on Mars before this. Sure. Get in there, all that stuff went smoothly. Where they wanted to pick up the story was when it went wrong.
But, all right, they've been in space it took, 200 days to get there? And they're on, so they've been around for a while. I mean, to have anything where you have a 10-minute getting to know you, they'd be telling each other in dialogue stuff they already know for the audience, and it would be really, really unnatural.
Yeah, I feel like people would complain about that as well.
But in this, there's two little things you get from all the chaos that's happening when they have the storm. Number one, Jessica Chastain, who plays Lewis, the commander, she's the last one to board the ship. She's really refusing to leave Watney. Martinez, played by Michael Pena, he's the one who's flying the ship, and he's got to, on one hand, he's being, okay, I've got to get us out of here. And then Sebastian Stander's Vogel basically says, what's going on? He goes, we're going to leave my friend here, or something along those lines. So you get a real sense that who the commander is and who's Watney's best friend on the mission.
But I'm going to counter that is that, and I guess we're going to really jump ahead here as we're talking about characters, but at the end when they're going back to rescue him, when they're all giving their motivations, I thought that the commander, Lewis, was going back because she felt it was honor-bound versus caring about him. I didn't understand Martinez's motivation for doing it, aside from kind of having a death wish, and I thought that, or the death wish is pretty strong, but kind of and then the two astronauts who applied to having an affair and not wanting to go back to their families. So, it didn't seem that, I didn't buy that any of these characters cared about each other. And if that's the motivation of their characters to decide to spend years to go back to Mars, again, yeah, you're right. I don't need to be spoon-fed everything, but a little bit more to make it seem like these are real people with real motivations for wanting, trying to get their friend back, instead of just saying, we stranded my friend. Show some friendship.
It's hard to speak to this because I've read the book, so I have the background. I understand a little bit. I guess they developed the friendships more, the connections between the people, but I think the thing that struck me, the reason why I liked it, is because they're astronauts, they're professionals, they're not these kind of unbalanced emotional people who need to have these dramatic kind of moments.
Mutinying and going against orders to risk their lives for a person that I didn't think they cared about. That goes against what, their actions go against the descriptions you're just saying.
I don't think it does. Because they're not mutinying against the captain. They're mutinying
against the military / NASA. Sure, but
but they're not even doing that because they got the information from NASA.
Yes.
Yeah, by someone who
surreptitiously. Sure, but I want to go back to touch something both you said sort of maybe tied together, and you jumped, I would say, a bit unfair of Ian to... They didn't show... That scene wasn't shown until later, so it's not like you got that... We're discussing specifically the introduction.
Yeah, but
retroactively, I get it. I see what you mean. But to Beth's point, I also feel like they could have gone the other way and giving, too much... see, it was too much backstory at the beginning, and you would have felt it was too dry and dull.
Yes.
So, it's a double-edged sword in that sense. But I think overall, it was serviceable and fine enough for me.
I also think in a lot of movies about space travel, they have these tense relationships with people that wouldn't necessarily happen because people are vetted before they're allowed on space missions. Yeah. They don't have this emotional baggage that they can't handle. There's psychological tests that these people have to go through. They know what they're doing. They don't act in a way that would seem... I don't want to say a word.
We all know the
terrible.
story about when Neil Armstrong almost shoved Buzz Aldrin through the airlock. So don't talk to me about psychological astronauts.
Sure.
There's one thing I remember with promotion for the film. They did a little clip of after they were in isolation for 10 days, they had with Matt Damon and Michael Pena and Jessica Chastain, and I kind of wish they had kind of found some way to integrate that into the movie, because first of all, it was all really good stuff. I mean, Matt Damon's character saying, like, he thought about Aquaman and how it was stupid. Like, if he could talk to fish, how could he talk to whales? Because whales are mammals. Michael Pena learned to masturbate with his left hand. And Jessica Chastain, they're like, were you ever afraid? And she was just like, I served on a submarine, and you could hear all the water on top of you, and you hear the boat creaking. I mean, that was great stuff. And yeah, that was not in the book, but it was also something that it's not going to go against the introduction or any of the character development to me, but I think that would have actually been a nice thing, because it would not have been vomitous exposition, characters telling each other what they already know. But if they found some way to work it in, I thought it would be a nice little bit of levity for what I consider to be a fairly tense movie. And anyway, that was just my little...
I see what you mean. So you're saying in space no one can hear your boredom, essentially. But it would have been a good character building moment, perhaps.
Well, it would have been nice, yeah.
Sure, but again, I'll just touch on this. I'm trying to force myself to view it narratively in the film and not compare it to the book, because they did do a number of different things, which, if were included in the film, maybe would have changed some of our opinions, but since they weren't, we have to judge it on that face value. So, given all that, has anyone anything else to add about the introduction, or what that they'd like to say? Shall we give our scores?
I'm going to give it a 1.
All right. Beth?
Give it a 1.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm going to give it a 1. The point I brought up didn't bother me all too much, as I mentioned earlier, but it was something I noticed.
So maybe a soft 1, but still overall.
Even a medium
all right,
1.
fair enough. And I'm going to give it a solid
medium
1.
Rare.
Medium rare run, and I also will do the same. All right, so we're on to the body of the story, the main action. Beth?
The body of the story consists of Mark trying to survive on Mars, and the people back on Earth trying to help him even before they realize that they can communicate with him. So things happen, disasters happen, he kind of gets through them. His personality, his kind of jokingness, his kind of wise-assery.
Yes, that's a good one. I like
helps
that.
him get through it, because he can kind of laugh at things that are terrible, that someone else there might be like, all right, I'm just done. I'm going to just die here. Who cares? So it's easy to follow him, because he makes you laugh even when you think you should be like basically crapping your pants. But so that's basically the body. He's just trying to survive.
A Guyver on Mars is how I somewhat described it as well.
I wanted to make the great what they did great in this movie was the fact that Mark Watney, when he was giving his video record, he was kind of jovial and so forth. But when they took it out of that and it was him off record, like, you were a fly on the wall, things like when he first gets contact, where he's like typing it in there, he sits back and he just starts crying because he's so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Or when, something goes wrong, he yells at himself, fuck, 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 fuck. And you see the fact that he's like, I'm going to die. And you see him pull himself together. And then his video log is kind of like it's the face he's presenting to everybody else.
He handles it almost unbelievably well.
To the humor aspect, though, they imply the word fuck constantly in this movie, but never seem to use it.
No,
that's not true.
He said
they say it right in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
You're allowed in a PG-13 movie to say it twice, I believe.
I think they did say it twice.
But then the rest of it, you could see him mouthing it.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
That's true.
They found the best way to get around saying fuck.
I normally would think that would... like, if you had told me that beforehand, I probably would assume it'd be annoying, but I felt it worked really well.
I didn't actually think about it until you mentioned it. Like, it was not an R-rated movie, I guess, but the first thing he says when he wakes up, he goes, is fuck. And then when he's also... yes, they silently have him mouth, like, what the fuck? And he's typing it too. It's bleeped out. But he does say when the third thing goes wrong, he's in the rover and he goes.
He's
going
the ceiling.
fuck. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
But there's no sound.
Like, no, he said it.
Sound? I thought you could hear him say
that.
it.
You hear like the beginning of it, and then it cuts out to him
fair
mouthing
enough.
it. So.
Either way.
And I also like the other ways they would say it, like. Every time when somebody from Mission Control, and I think it may have been Kapoor talking to somebody, he's just like, he keeps telling everybody, when this happens, he tells so and so to go have sex with himself.
Yes.
And they also
but that was straight out of the book, though.
They also used the phrase the F word, and they said the F word in a different language.
Yeah.
And they had it like charactered out on this one transcript.
What I was gonna mention about this is like he displays like an epic competence throughout the movie, where he's like this super competent guy who can do anything, but like, it's believable because he's an astronaut, like, and he's trained to do all this stuff well, and he's a botanist, so he's trained to like grow these plants, even though it's on foreign body or whatever.
Maritime.
But he
law.
at times it really didn't bug me in the movie, but at times he kind of bordered on a Gary Stu type character,
Actually, they did it brilliantly because about halfway, I was initially went in assuming that this was Castaway in space, but I realized halfway through, and I'll get to this during themes, but as I started paying attention to this movie, yes, he's super competent. They actually play it off perfectly because right at the beginning, he makes one mistake that they play off for humor when he ends up trying to...
He lights the hydrogen on fire.
Hydrogen on fire and blows himself up. And that adds a level of humanity to him and humility to him that allows him to be perfect in every other situation.
For the rest of the movie, yes, because that is true.
You laugh at his error and then you forgive the perfectness later on.
But he's not a wunderkind either, because once he makes contact with NASA, they're helping him get to do what he needs to do. Like they're running the simulation back on Earth and telling him what to do. So it's just like, okay, he's got the know-how, the functionality that you're going to need as an astronaut, but to always think outside the box, he does have help with that.
And the other thing is he's facing such monumental odds that if there were a pileup of fuck-ups that he got over throughout this movie, it would be completely unbelievable. He'd be like,
yeah,
any one of these could have easily killed him. One, maybe he gets lucky, whatever, but if there were a bunch of screw-ups throughout the movie that he overcame, you'd be like, he should be dead. He should absolutely... he should be dead anyway.
Well, in a traditional kind of survivor movie, you have a average person put in a situation that's really beyond their control. In Castaway, you have Tom Hanks on Deserted Island. In Gravity, you had Sandra Bullock, who... It's a space movie, but she was repairing... she was an engineer, not necessarily an astronaut.
Right.
So she was... she had that kind of... removal from that Matt Damon didn't. Matt Damon was an astronaut. He was perfect in all of his actions, whereas Sandra Bullock was kind of fumbling along. And that's the thing you can root for. That's the purpose of Survivor. It is to go along with their triumphs after their failures. And Matt Damon really had no failures, so I was never rooting for his triumphs because he always had triumphs. Basically, I never felt that his life was in peril.
You said the stakes are lowered because of the way.
I would say that in Gravity, though, so it's been a little while since I've seen that, but I don't remember Sandra Bullock screwing, or whatever her character's name was, screwing up a lot in that movie. I think that she just had more thrown at her, a lot more violent things thrown at her than Watney did.
Maybe, but we'll do who did it better later on of those two films. I just want to say. My analysis was, I thought they did a good job. I thought something we usually give credit for, especially in Ian's camp, is that it was paced very well, I think, throughout. And they would have a section of Watney on Mars, and they would have what's happening back on Earth, and the meetings in NASA, and even the PR angle was very nicely woven in there. So I think overall, I'm going to give it credit for pacing out the story. I think almost perfectly. I was never they didn't show one thing too long. They didn't also gloss over anything.
Beth, like I said, everybody here except for Ian's read the book, and in the book there's a lot more minutia.
Sure, but I said,
the thing
can't bring that in.
You can't. Any one of us
take your space bag and jet Mars, my
for
friend,
4 hours and watch this thing. But the thing is, it was extremely well paced. They put exactly what they needed in there. You got the hunger thing. You got how dangerous the environment is. You saw how easy it was to blow yourself up because when the airlock blows up. But the thing that I also love that I thought they did really well, and I guess this is up to everybody's bias, but there's a scene which is one of my favorite scenes in the book, and they kept it in the movie when Vogel gets a data package, and he's just he goes to Kate Mara, he's just can you help me open it? It says my children, I can't open it, and it's Sean Bean's character saying look. Here's the Rich Parnell plan.
Yeah.
It's just you guys got to talk about this. And the thing is, there's so many characters in this movie. There's so much going on that I think just you kind of ride the emotion of everybody's emotion. And viscerally, I had all the same reactions I did in the book. So from something where there was a lot of minutia to a movie where they really kept the pacing good, I thought the movie was every bit the equal of the book.
I slightly disagree, especially since the book is terrible. Although I never read it, but no, I slightly disagree about your thing about the pacing. Towards the end, I felt it was starting to get a little long, and specifically back on Earth, there are characters certainly did not need to be in this movie.
Yeah, I agree
and
with that somewhat.
felt did not add anything to this movie. I mean, I like Donald Glover, and I know he played like theoretically an important part in this movie, but like.
No, he played Donald Glover.
If he's not in this movie, could they have had someone come up with that? They could have had one of the jet propulsion lab guys.
Sure. Really.
So I felt that there was, and again, they had so many characters in this movie that I felt I didn't know most of them, nor understood why I should care about. So I don't know, like.
I see what you're saying.
That would have been one thing that would have pissed me off if they didn't include Rich Purnell in it. I thought it was just so cool. You've got this like geek who's completely has this unkept, chaotic life, but he's like brilliant, and like as soon as he comes up with the plan, he's just like, all right, he like shuts everybody off, and the guy's like, you know, I'm your boss. And he's like, and he does his calculation. He spends 4 months on it. To me, whether or not how developed or not his character was, the fact that he was there, the fact that they showed how he came up with it, that he was this left field anomaly. I thought that just added like another flavor to the narrative. I mean,
I don't agree that we have to completely divorce your reaction to the book to your reaction to the movie, because I feel like some of the characters were in the movie because they were in the book and people would expect them to be in the movie. And if they weren't, like if the Richard Purnell guy was not there, that would be almost like a slap in the face to people who like the book.
I guess that's true, but I don't know. On the surface, they're still making it for the broad audience that maybe they assume you have, but they can't count on it, so they have to
maybe
strip
that
it down a bit.
Shouldn't be it. Maybe the people who read the book should be rewarded for having
sure.
experienced
I don't
the whole
disagree with
story.
that, I'm just saying it's the Hollywood system to be that way, more or less. Good.
It is a Hollywood system to like merge characters. And I love the fact that, and I'm going to try to divorce myself from the book, because I felt that with regard to the pacing, with the way they brought characters in and out, the way they always had little chyrons under the, to tell you who everybody was, because they know they're throwing a lot of information at you. There's a book, I read Sagan's book, Contact, which I loved. And I went to see the movie, and it's probably my favorite, whoever the director's name, I can't block his name. But Matthew McConaughey's character was a fusion of two characters. Mm. And somebody I spoke to that really bothered her. And to me, I was just like, you know what? They made it work. In this, because of this situation, the way this movie is, there's so many components, there are so many characters. If you start fusing this thing together, it's just like, okay, this major thing's happening, and like I'm only seeing the same 5 characters.
Sure, you're saying perhaps it'd be more confusing than having another character. Sure.
Why does everybody know so much? Why is everybody wearing so many hats?
Well, why does that Damon know everything? He's wearing so many hats, like sort of.
It's good training from NASA.
Yeah, like as this is getting a little bit off topic, obviously, but like as an astronaut, you're trained in everybody else's job too, who's on the mission, so that people can do your job if you die.
But I'm countering the point that Chris just made about how people at NASA would.
Yeah, but on the ground, I think there's a lot more specialization.
Well, you've got the director, you've got the.
I mean, not that I know.
You've got the mission
NASA works,
specialist guy, the guy who ran the mission.
Let's get the
you've got the PR. You've got the PR people.
Get the director NASA.
You've got the controllers. You've got the head of the JPL. You've got. I mean, there's. If you start fusing these people, it's going to be like, why is this?
One guy heads 3 labs or whatever. Sure, I get it.
Even if you're on a mission that has nothing to do with space, has nothing to do. If you only have access to 6 people on a mission, you want everyone to kind of know how to do more than one thing.
Sure.
An entire part of the mission lost if one person is lost.
Sure, that is true.
I have a question mainly for Ian, because when the woman found Mark Watney on the satellite images, it seemed to come because.
The rover.
The Kapoor sent her an email saying, check these coordinates. And she looked, and then she found that this guy was probably alive. Yeah. Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, because he had gotten permission from...
they want to find his body.
To look at the...
So look at it. That's where they thought they left him behind, and where he should be dead at.
Because that was one part that annoyed me in the translation from the book, because in the book...
It seemed like they glossed it a little bit in the movie.
She kind of found it as a fluke. She wasn't told to look there. She just was looking for like hours and hours and hours and saw that something changed.
But they did.
So I felt like her character got a little bit.
Well, I'm kind of glad that they didn't have that part in
Yeah.
it because it would have stretched
Sure.
this movie even longer.
I see what you mean. Like, yeah, you can make the case for both, but I think what I got out of it was like they had a quick conversation about we should get confirmation basically, and like if we could get like
but then she found it like that.
right.
It was
but
instantaneous.
they knew where they had left them off, so like that's it didn't like stretch my immersion, if you will.
It didn't bother me either because they kept her alive as an important character throughout.
No, it seemed like that.
She's saying the way they
particular
found
thing
him.
was just
Yeah.
really, really
Sure.
quick, and it didn't take any work from anybody.
I understand that, again, it was like a cut for time, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I don't think they diminished her character at all. And the one thing is, with so many supporting characters, I like the fact that it gave you the sense that so many people over so many of these agencies were really pushing for him before they introduced mass populace.
But the thing is, I got more out of the few scenes at the Chinese space station and their motivations, and they were better developed than most of the supporting characters at NASA.
Maybe.
So, like, at least in my opinion on that, and so it gave a broad spectrum, but with a broad spectrum, you lose kind of
some focus.
there.
Sure. Well, having said all that, anyone have any other things to add about the main body of the Martian? All right. Well, what are you going to give it? Beth, start off. Since you started off. 1. Alrighty. Chris?
I'm going to give it a very strong one.
All right. E?
I'm going to give it a 1.
I'll give it a solid 1. It was consistent throughout. Never lost me. Steve-O?
Yeah, I'll give it a 1 as well. I like this movie.
All right. Fair enough. So now we're on to the climax and end of the Martian. Chris, the conclusion.
Okay. After 400 and almost 500 days.
400 XX days.
He what happens is NASA helps him get the rover to drive over to the evac ship for the next mission, Ares 4, which is a 3,200 kilometer journey.
Mm-hmm.
And the ship, the Hermes, the ship the other 5 astronauts are on, do the slingshot around Earth, pick up the supplies, go back and pick up Watney, and they basically have Watney in the evac ship, basically stripped to the bones with a tarp over, to protect him from the elements. And
convertible.
Yeah. It's
basically
a
in a
MacGyver
convertible
spaceship. Yes.
And he gets up there. There's a couple of little things they do to slow the ship up, and they change the trajectory. And I don't really want to get way too detailed in it, but it worked. It was tense. It was fun. I like the fact that Jessica Chastain, the Commander Lewis, she was the one who wanted to go out and get him because she felt the most guilty about leaving him. And then they had this tag at the end where it's like what happens to them afterwards, that he's teaching and so forth. And to be honest with you, I was a little unsure about that at first, but I actually, in retrospect, I like what they did because it shows Watney talking to a class, like
it was a fine epilogue.
Yeah, and then the music they chose over it, and like with the rest of the movie, when they showed the cast, they had little chyrons on it to like let who. So it was a really nice tie-in.
Nice
yeah, that could have really crashed.
Sure. I was a little bit confused because Mark Watney seemed to have aged more than anyone else in the epilogue. I was a little like,
well, surviving Mars would do that to you.
I guess so, but when they picked him up,
radiation,
but he didn't look like that necessarily when they picked him up. He was just skinnier, but then he had bulked up again to be back on Earth, but he looked like 10 years older, and everyone else looked like it was like a week later.
I think it was just because he put on glasses.
Okay.
No, he had some gray in there.
No,
being in space for a long time can affect your eyesight, so you would need glasses.
But what I got out of all that is just that he's been teaching classes for years and years now. This is like his next incoming class.
No,
that was day one.
That was day one of
his
his teaching
back.
career.
Yeah, his day one of teaching, but how long has he been back? You know
Oh, yeah, he's probably back a couple of years.
That's what
But
I'm
then
saying.
when they went back to everyone else, it seemed like it was
I guess
not that
Sure,
far.
maybe, but
Now
now that I think about it, I think you're right.
This ending had so much patriotism in it that like Michael Bay would be embarrassed.
That is not true.
That
is
people
way
waving
too
across
for fuck's sake,
American
no.
flag.
All right, well, I think you're about to launch that.
You don't.
You're about to launch that next question, which
Plus,
we'll get to.
I didn't understand anybody's motivation for why they were acting, especially the rest of the crew. I don't know. I didn't like the ending of this. It didn't work for me.
fair enough. I think it did. Like you brought up something earlier, a sort of survival-ish movie, and it was a fine like little coda to it to me. Like there was nothing. I can't say anything to you guys that I thought was particularly wrong with it, or that came out of left field, or that was executed poorly. So I think it was a fine conclusion. Was it the most satisfying conclusion ever? No, but in no way was it dissatisfying.
It was the
conclusion
structure of
that
it
it
was
needed.
incredibly generic.
And yes, I know like what you said goes into the next question, which we will speak about shortly. And it is true. However, the conclusion of the narrative itself, I think, was fine.
I'm just going to say this because I'm really trying to keep this a movie discussion. But in the book ends with him getting.
Good job keeping it in the movie discussion.
Right, no. What I'm saying is the book ends when he arrives on there and they remove his, helmet. And he's like, "Oh man, you
really
stink."
stinky.
And the book ends when he's in his rack, just saying like, "Hey, I got another 212 days, blah blah blah. It's good, blah blah." And then that's it. They haven't even gone home.
Sure.
I'm sure that the studio said, "No fucking way. We need a tag on this. We need." And you know what?
That's fair.
But the cool thing is, and why I got the sense that the studio asked for this, is because the music they played, the way they showed what everybody was like, the way they kind of fitted in when they introduced their characters and when they introduced the scenes. I thought if it was done any other way, this scene could have really fallen on its ass. And I thought, for something that was obviously something the studio told them they do, I thought they did it fairly well.
Honestly, I would have preferred it ended right after they saved him, as the book did. But like, as far as the, I guess, true end of this film went, it felt more like an epilogue to me.
That's what I was saying.
Like an ending.
Yeah. Good
So
point.
like, the way that I see the narrative ending is when he gets onto the ship. And then there's like this epilogue that's the rest of the film. I mean, half of the like quote unquote ending they do over credits.
Yeah.
So
that's
like,
a funny point.
That's true.
That's what I'm saying. I think it was a studio said do this. And
I
There were
completely
people that had
agree. It
left
seems
the
like
theater by
attacked
the
on
time they
studio
started
ending.
doing it.
I'd gotten up and started walking.
Yeah, it was a slow roll. It was almost like a Marvel
Yeah.
thing. We're like, oh shit.
But I agree with Steve-O. The movie narrative concludes when they rescue him, and everything on Earth is an epilogue. And I like the way they tied it into the.
Honestly, all the rest, I kind of agree with you, Ian. Like all the rest after that part. Oh, by the way, all the flag waving happens before that end that I just said. But like
Regardless.
all the rest that after that does kind of seem like, hey, join NASA or like whatever.
It was only missing Liv Tyler in like a little sundress in
Hush your
front of
mouth.
a giant American flag with going to see.
Well, that was also cut from the original.
Oh, I'm
edit.
sorry. Am I talking about a shitty movie? Yes,
All
I
right,
am.
all right. However, I just want to.
I don't begrudge them their feel-good ending.
They also
Even though
slingshot around around something in that movie.
Yeah,
as well.
I agree with
Sure.
Steve-O that
think
they
it's the
could have
asterisk.
ended it when they rescued him and he
right
was
there,
on the ship.
yeah.
I'd be fine with that ending, but I don't begrudge
But the
them
epilogue itself,
the
you're saying, was fine
It's
too. I just want to point out though that Ian and I said this upon exiting the theater that they chose the wrong Bowie song. They had a nice subversion that should have been Major Tom. They went with Starman. However, Life on Mars would have been the correct choice there at the ending song.
Correct. I was expecting Life on Mars, but I did like I like the song.
So,
they chose.
anyways,
But Major Tom had already been claimed by Chris Hadfield, the actual
sure,
astronaut.
yeah. So like I
That's-
said, like
that's
it's too
true.
obvious, so it's fine that they didn't do it. But they just amongst the other two they could have chosen from. That's all I want to say about that. Having said that, what are the scores for the conclusion? Go ahead, lead off.
I'm gonna give it a 1.
All right,
I'm gonna give it 0.
E. All right, I will give it a 1 as well. Steve-O?
I'm going to go with a 1 for the ending that I said, and then the epilogue I would give a 0, but overall I'll give it a 1.
All right, and Beth.
It's fine. It didn't ruin it.
I'll give it a 1.
Alrighty,
It's not the strongest one of this movie, but it's still a 1.
fair enough. So now everyone, prepare yourselves for
Uh-oh.
what we're about to hear.
The detractor.
All right.
Since Mr. Manzer here begins the question of themes.
I'm rolling up my.
Or the theme of,
Literally rolling up
the
his
theme of
sleeves.
themes.
All right.
Figuratively rolling up his literal sleeves.
Yes.
Anybody have duct tape for this one? All right.
So, about half. All right, first of all, again, I haven't read the book, so I am not going to comment upon the
You're a
themes
dirty plebeian.
that
Go
the
on.
book addressed and the movie probably didn't. But I realized something fantastic halfway through this film. I mentioned earlier that I came in thinking it was going to be a Survivor piece. However, it met none of the criteria of it being a Survivor piece except for a person getting stranded in a situation. I realized that it was a propaganda piece instead. Not only that, it fits the mold for a kind of the 1980s military kind of pro-military, come join
America, fuck yeah.
So this is the updated Navy SEALs.
Oh no, but it's for NASA instead. It's a fantastic, and I agree with that mission. I like the fact that they're
agree with the sentiment you're saying?
They're trying to influence the screenwriter and the director. We're taking this story and using it to influence the younger people who are going to see it to come join, I guess, Starfleet or whatever the Star Trek
Be a
thing
scientist,
was.
of course.
Starfleet.
Now, here's the thing: is in a lot of kind of if you take the basic premise of this, a man gets left behind in a hostile situation when they think he's dead, and his crew, his platoon, moves on. They realize that he's still alive, so his original platoon has to make the choice to go back into hostile territory at great risk to rescue the one man. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, the general is dealing with politics while the scrappy captain of the platoon is discussing how he should send his men back, and the general's like, no, we can't do that because we can't run the risk of more men to save.
He's a senator. He's a politician. He's not a soldier.
I'm making the metaphor, and each of these are the traditional tropes in that kind of war movie. And if you go get a job at NASA, you're probably not going to be a buff Matt Damon on Mars MacGyvering things. The same way you're probably not going to be a sniper in stranded in North Korea, killing hundreds of Ramboing.
Sure.
So again, this fits all of those kind of motifs, and then at the very end, all the flags being waved, the swell of pride and at this point, it's not militarily. It's the idea of America being great through the space race, and that we can bring China together, London, the United States, all getting together
Not Russia, though.
to go help a stranded American in a hostile territory. Everyone around the world waving American flags. Such fantastic example of propaganda.
Well,
and I would hate it if this was a military movie, but I respect it because it's for a side I agree with.
By the way, no one around the world was waving American flags except for America. No, they weren't. They
Not
were all
China.
watching the TV screens.
No, there are people. I believe. I was
pretty
believe
sure
in London there was American.
I was
Maybe
looking for
London,
American
but
flags,
definitely not China.
I thought they were waving a NASA flag.
They're not going to.
Yeah, but China was cheering for America.
Yeah, but two things about that. Number one, scientists are a different plane than politicians, than the military. The politicians are really much to blame for how fucked up the world is. The military are just the pawns for lesser or greater extent. Hold on a second.
We're getting deep.
Well,
check out our political show if you want more of Chris's rants.
No, but the whole thing is, when you're talking about a group of scientists, they don't really see borders as much as...
Yeah, but you're also understanding that there has been a failure in science to control the narrative. And I feel that science has been lately attempting to rectify that. And especially NASA has. NASA has been doing a much better job of promoting their activities. I'm not saying that NASA had anything to do with this movie, but I'm saying that it's part of this trend that's going where we're trying to make science more palatable to the average person. And this is one of those kind of, I think, the first mainstream movie.
A vehicle to do that.
Maybe Interstellar had, but this was even you saw NASA blazing logo constantly after epic scenes of people defying death and doing great science. And to that point too, they had a lot of great nerd jokes in there where it's you come to NASA and you'll find you're a nerdy kid, you don't have friends. You come to NASA, you'll be surrounded by people who understand your humor, and you'll be badasses.
Well, like I said in the beginning, in the NASA, you can be a cool nerd, which is what you're saying the theme of this movie was. Good, Chris.
Well, Beth and I were talking about this earlier, is the depiction of science now. Because if you go to the two asteroid movies in the 90s, we have Deep
came
Impact.
Out at the same exact time.
Yeah, Deep Impact, which is a more realistic take on it. There are some questionable things, but overall. And you've got Armageddon, which makes me absolutely bonker shit when the shuttle goes off and drops its solid rocket boosters and its fuel tank. That makes no sense.
All right.
But the whole point is, no, but seriously, that kind of bullshit makes me nuts. However, you look at things like Deep Impact, Contact, Interstellar, even the two movies, Mission to Mars and Red Planet, that were released in the end of the 90s, And hold on a second.
Ghost of Mars? You're not including that?
What?
Ghost of Mars?
No, I'm not including Ghost of Mars.
No one's including that.
But if you're talking about movies that are attempting to have a foothold in reality, I mean, I have noticed that a lot of space movies now are tending more towards the realistic than the fantastic. And I think that goes to part what you were saying in terms of, NASA and scientists and getting people to realize this is what space is. It's scary. It's wondrous. And I like the depiction that they're going with, that space is realistic now, that we're not in 2015 going to have artificial gravity. I really appreciate that, what they're doing.
But you also you're saying space is scary, but that's not what they showed during this movie.
Well, they
showed what could go wrong, but they showed that
we overcame it.
It's like the soldier behind enemy lines who is kind of, because of his army training, is fantastic and perfect at surviving this. It's the same trope involved with this astronaut. Like, for instance, science and theoretical kind of science is a primer on one end, and you have Top Gun on the other. And this is somewhere in between those two. Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying is when you have serious science fiction, you've got like 2001, you've got this, you've got Interstellar, you've got Contact. But the way they're showing serious science fiction is, there's always going to be like we can overcome things because that's what the audience wants to see.
We will overcome space.
But I think at the same time, every one of these things shows you that there is a certain danger to space. You're in a tin can in a vacuum.
Sure.
And honestly, as much as I don't necessarily want to completely agree with you, Ian, there is the point at the end where Watney says, if you just keep on working, you'll make it back. It's like, yes. He doesn't want to, at no point during this movie do they want to give you any inclination that if you are smart enough that you just will die anyway. The entire point of this film is that if you're smart enough, you can make it back from anything, basically.
Sure.
But I feel like this movie and the book also, so I'm just going to say the story, I feel like the main point of it was that a person, and with the backing of people who will come together to protect a person, because we're all people, I feel like there was a bigger overarching story. It wasn't like the negative, like, oh, there's all these politics and there's all this strife and there's all this stuff. I feel like it was just a really positive sort of, people will come together to save a person who can take care of himself but needs a little help from everyone. And it's not just pro NASA or pro US. It's like everyone in the movie came together. Like China was like, do we need to help? We won't get caught if we don't help. No one will know, but we're scientists and we will come and help.
But I was thinking about this. It's the baby in the well syndrome. If you've got miners trapped in a mine in Chile, you've got a baby that falls down a well. In the 80s, when I was in high schown, there was a big thing where some kid fell down the well.
How did that baby get into the well?
No, but what I'm saying is you get like a human interest story that, anybody can relate to, and you're going to rally people behind it.
Call me cynical.
You're cynical.
Yes. Any feel-good story that isn't aimed at children has like a motivation behind it. And the concept that like people are gathering together for this cause. Yeah, like that's what they... Like, in a sense, that's the intent of it. To show it in its positive light.
Is that so bad, though?
Again, it depends upon your viewpoint of the thing. For instance, I'm very anti-war. I'm very anti-military. So I hate pro-war movies. I hate things like American Sniper or Zero Dark 30. I despise those kind of movies because I think they glorify war. I happen to agree with an interpretation of the same genre. Now, the thing is, should I give it rating? Should I give it a good rating because I agree with its message, or even if this had a militarized kind of NASA to it, I would like.
Which sounds awesome.
But it didn't.
But that's the point. If it had, I would have hated this movie for having that. Mm-hmm. But because I agree with the message of it, although it uses all the same tactics. Like, for instance, I hate Fox News, but if I was watching the liberal version of Fox News, I should hate them because they're pulling the same tactics.
Sure. Like, I get, like, yes, what you're saying is, on the surface, ostensibly, it's like humanity pulling together to save one of its own in a foreign, the most foreign destination possible. But, of course, slapped onto it, like, and not even, like, subtly, really, is, like, a jingoistic kind of, like, NASA's awesome as well. It's basically the trope is America saves the day, where and the world unites behind them. Yes, something Beth said, like the scientists from China, like we could help because we're scientists, so like therefore it transcends politics and so forth and nationalism, but not really, because the message still is yes, again, like I said, on the surface, but underneath that is it's sort of insidiously inserting that, and of course it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna turn upon whether or not you agree with that one side or not, and that depends how deeply you want to attach yourself to it.
Well, there's one part they glossed over in the movie, and I think it would have been that was one of the few minor complaints I had with it, was that in order for the scientists to sell it to their government, they had to say there's this quid pro quo with the Americans, and that like, hey, we're going to do this for them, but they're going to let us take an astronaut on their next Mars trip.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to have representation there, and I thought that they at the end you saw that there was a Chinese astronaut there, but it would have been it would have been better if, in the context of the story, it's
that was barely noticeable though in the movie. Like if you would have just been like, oh, it's an American dude who is Asian, like who's from
To your point, then instead of having the Chinese be kind of backhanded in here and saying, well, we don't need to help, let's help anyway. They would have been slimy and say we're only going to help because I think it's both negative portrayals of the Chinese.
But I don't think it was a backhanded thing. It was like, we're not obligated to help. But again, we just want to help.
But it makes the Americans seem more virtuous.
Yeah, but the
way it was in the film.
But the way it was in the film, because you've got the scientist perspective, which is we got to help these people, but how are we going to sell it to our government, the politicians? And you're going to say, well, we're going to do this quid pro quo with America, and that's going to sell it to our leaders. Sure.
Anyway, we're getting off of the movie on this topic because we're just basically talking about what happens in the book now. It's barely noticeable that it happens in the movie.
No, but I'm just saying to Ian's point that if this were in the movie, if they had included this part in the movie...
Yeah, it would have been my... Then, so you're reinforcing my point. Thank you.
Would you have preferred that?
I don't know, because I didn't read it. I don't know how they would have interpreted it, and I don't think they would have included it because of the point they were trying to make.
Fair enough. Well, the theme of NASA comes calling for you. Are you going to give it a 1 or a 0?
I'm going to give it a 0 because I don't agree
the way it was
this
told
type
off.
Of. Right. I don't agree with the propaganda pieces.
Sure. This is a hard one for me because that's a very good point. And normally, I will be with you. I resent anything in any medium that tries to, whether obviously or not, and this one is more obvious than many others, to try to insert like a nationalistic message. However, the point you raised earlier is I agree with supporting NASA or science in general, like even though it was ham-fistedly, clearly to me done. So I think if I'm on the fence, I have to give it a 1 just because I agree with their agenda in this propaganda piece, even though it clearly is a propaganda piece.
Right. This is if we're looking at in terms of that, I'm not sure that was the only theme, although it was what dominated this conversation. So I don't know if I can rate this on another theme without going into it and talking about it.
What other themes were there? And go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's clearly the idea of overwhelming positivity in an impossible situation, and just the idea of trying we did actually talk about this a little bit. The idea of science over politics, in terms of a situation like this where you have a scientist who's stranded, and it's kind of everybody that's involved is trying to do everything they can to get this guy out of there, even though it's far more expensive and it's far more politically the wrong decision probably to try. Although maybe not. You get a lot of goodwill out of it.
What a better world we would be if scientists ran it.
I've been saying that for years, man.
I can't decide if you're saying that because you're trying to make a point about how it wouldn't be a better world, or
no. I'm saying it to reinforce my point. I absolutely agree with. I don't know if a technocracy or would be the perfect institution, but I do think that NASA and scientists should get a lot more respect in our country.
Yeah, I completely agree. So
having said
that, I think there are other themes that I liked in this. I'm not sure if the propaganda part of it was not a huge part of it to me until you brought it up. It was
so it was effective propaganda. That's what he's saying. Yes,
fair enough. It was but I mean, it was obvious that they are pro science and pro NASA, and clearly this was a pro NASA movie, so it's an American movie. Just having said that, but As far as those other themes go that I briefly mentioned just now, I like them, and I'm going to give it a 1.
On the basis of those, all right. Beth?
I tend to bristle when I feel like I'm being manipulated. So listening to Ian, to your discussion of this, makes me almost want to like bristle, but I can't. I mean, it might be my own sort of confirmation bias, me being a victim of my own confirmation bias.
Which often happens here on our reviews, yeah.
Which can happen, but I don't feel like I was being that manipulated to like a degree that would offend me. And I feel like I'm pretty sensitive to that, but I don't know. I don't...
Next time you watch this film, watch it through the lens of my point, because, again, I thought of this halfway through, and it started, like, and I was looking for it.
It was more and more obvious, yeah.
And, like, it started, like...
Cylinders started clicking into place.
Yeah. Again, maybe I was having confirmation bias in my realization and wanting to find this kind of stuff, but, like, there were just little subtle things that just kept
And I
popping
suppose
up.
that's me wanting these subtle things to manipulate the rest of the world to come to my point of view.
Well, that's what I'm
Which is that space exploration is good.
Sure.
And NASA is something we should all support. And the coming together of the world space exploration, whatever,
community
would be great, a great thing. So I'm giving it a 1. I'm feeling like I don't know, uncertain. But I'm definitely giving it a 1.
Well, you're certain about what score you're giving.
I'm certain about the score, yeah.
I thought there were many themes to this. Propaganda didn't come to my mind. Avatar is a propaganda film.
Yes,
let's watch that piece of shit sometime. But
or not and say we did. But
all right. Anyway, I'm giving this a 1.
Okay.
I'm giving this a 1 because there were a lot of themes in there. Even if there is a pro-NASA bent, I'm giving it a 1. I felt there was a lot more going on in this, and if there was propaganda towards science, then fuck yeah.
All right, fair enough. I just want to. I'll finish off real quickly. It's hard to think it's a propaganda piece if you're already in favor of whatever agenda it's promoting. So
I will fully accept that I'm the only principled individual at this table right now.
Fair enough.
Confirmation
whatever
bias.
principles you may have, but no, I mean, like, I'm just saying that's going to be like largely true regardless. Like your point about Fox News, etc. So I think this question turns upon that, and I think we've all expressed our opinions about it. So we're on to antagonists now. And I get to enter this one, which is an odd one because who exactly?
Which is really good because Scott is very good at picking out antagonists.
Usually,
obviously, it's society, Scott.
Well, it's space
it is in
itself, of
every
course.
movie.
Mars, yeah, really, like the desolate landscape of Mars is the enemy here. Like, yes, as facetious as that may be, it's basically, as Ian said, survival story. So whatever
versus
Not a
nature.
survival
but no,
story.
it's the hostile land that you're in, right? Like that. I mean, like
It
that's the only
didn't seem
antagonist.
all that hostile to me.
No, because he was great at it, but, you know, we can discuss that before, and we will, again, soon in a second. But regardless, like, yeah, normally I'd be like, the political, those who are in blocking science would be the antagonists, but they weren't really, like, the world came together.
There wasn't anybody blocking
because it's the
science.
propaganda
Mars
piece.
was the antagonist.
That's basically all
It's
I can say,
definitely Mars.
really.
Will McAvoy kind of was, because he was like the head bureaucrat of NASA.
Yeah, but I would never call him an antagonist.
Yeah, but he kind of like was the he wanted to stop them from going back to rescue.
Yeah, but he
wasn't,
always wanted to rescue.
He wanted to
motivations-
save him.
yeah.
He just wanted to do it.
His
his
motivations-
He's
way.
the politician.
His motivations were still like in favor of saving Mark Watney, just that the way he went about him clash. Of course, it's a classic like clash. Like, no, listen to my plan, no my plan. Like it's a fucking the Brink kind of thing, in a sense. So I guess given all that, there's not really a lot of depth to look into this question. The hostile nature of space and Mars in particular, like specifically here, is going to be like humans trying to survive against a hostile environment. This one being the most hostile of all because it's the most foreign one we know of as of now. And I'll have to give that a 1. Trying to survive in space is hard, as he said.
Right. I mean, that's there's not much to say about it. Mars is
like I
the
said,
antagonist, I think. What's the law? Anything that can go wrong?
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law, maybe, is the antagonist. Although everything that went wrong was like perfectly like
But he could
fixed
solve
immediately.
it all.
with a little bit of duct tape.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Duct tape.
a tarp and a duct tape is all you need to survive on Mars.
Yeah, well, the protagonist, of course, I'm going to say is duct tape.
Well,
but,
also, you need to be able to invent water out of thin air.
Sure, and an astronaut would know how to do that. And
exactly.
Yeah, I feel like once again, my opinion is colored by the fact of the book because Mars seemed so much harder to deal with in the book than in the movie. But I will still give it a 1 because it still looked like Mars was a place I wouldn't necessarily be able to survive given my own skills.
The idea of surviving on Mars, I think, probably
like having
automatically
to farm potatoes with my own
1.
poop is a bit
who
beyond
hasn't done
my
that?
skill.
But let me say,
I just haven't
do
done
that
it
in
on
my
Mars
backyard.
yet.
like, the vistas on Mars were absolutely beautiful.
Stunning. I agree with that. So we'll speak to that in style, I think. But
like
agree.
again, like you're saying, if they had colonized Mars, this movie really sold me on wanting to go visit Mars once it was. I didn't have
I
to
agree with that too.
eat
Bring your own
potatoes.
I somewhat agree with that.
I give it a 1.
All right.
Yes, I give it a 1.
Scores?
It's a man versus nature story,
Unless anyone has anything to
and
add.
the intricacies of bureaucracy. I have read the book, and I do know they cut out a lot of minutia, but still, book aside, I had the book in my head, in the back of my head, but I was really following the movie because I really wanted to see. And to be honest with you, I thought they communicated the dangers well. I give it a 1.
All right.
Just to point out, there were a lot more disasters in the book than
I was
there were in the movie.
I was going to speak to that too, but
and
you're
there
right
were
about that.
a few disasters that I would have liked to see on screen.
The storm on the way back.
I would have liked to see when he crashed.
The rover crashes.
The rover.
Yes.
In the end, when
I
he was
pointed that
going
out.
to the thing. I was really looking forward to seeing that, but I would have just liked to see a lot of them.
The one thing, and we discussed this the other day, Scott, what was the one thing we both really wanted to see?
The hydrogen thing.
The hydrogen. He's like,
they did it, but it just wasn't.
no,
as...
they did the second part, but not the part
Yeah.
where he's like, oh, there's too much hydrogen. I'm going to go sleep. I'm
Yeah.
going to let it air out, but I'm going to go sleep in the rover.
They sort of
tonight.
condensed it and glossed over it, so like it wasn't as interesting as it was again, but it was fine enough for in the movie.
I feel I would give this a 1 if I had seen. I read the book, but since I had only seen the movie, and since we're reviewing the movie,
Sure.
if this was intended to be a Survivor, I never thought
The environment
that
was
Matt Damon was like again
risk.
anything like Tom Hanks in Castaway. You know he's going to survive, but like I felt tension at him trying to survive. Here, I felt that anything that Mars threw at him, Matt Damon would have come up with a MacGyver solution to, as you mentioned earlier.
Fair enough.
So again,
0.
Mars, which should be the most threatening thing, wasn't.
Right.
I was trying to think as I watched the movie, and even when I read the book, I was trying to figure out whether I thought that this character could actually die because he was like the narrator of the book. So I was pretty sure like he's probably going to survive because he's the main narrator, and it's the kind of first person for most of the part because it's his journal entries.
Yeah.
And in the movie, I was trying to figure out whether I could actually feel that he had a chance of dying because of his
Was he ever at
main
risk?
character
Was his stakes
status.
high enough that you thought he could?
I mean, I didn't think he wasn't at risk. I wasn't sure if I could really see that the fact that he might not make it. The movie, I think, made it seem more like he might not make it because they had so many of the other characters brought up closer. But I don't really think I ever really... I mean, I definitely sensed his sense of danger and the fact that he was in danger, but I didn't ever think he was really going to not survive.
It would have been a much more interesting movie if they thought he was still alive, like he communicated a little bit, died, and then they just spent the movie trying to rescue this guy who was dead all along.
You somewhat thunder, but like in theory they could have it like it's his records and journals, but he dies and then they get back and that's all it's left. It's like a fucking like video game like audio log remnant.
Maybe this is something we'll get to when we get to protagonists. But what I thought really captured, because they were pacing it for a movie, was the fact that his persona when he was recording his log versus his emotional reaction off of it. And like I said, for what the minutia they didn't show, I thought that lent some gravitas to the situation.
Well, we're talking protagonists now, but I still need.
We haven't finished antagonists.
No. I said this will probably go more, but
I'm waiting on Steve-O's score for antagonists.
Well, I'm going to give this a 0 because Mark Watney beats the shit out of Mars and Murphy's Law in this film.
Fair enough.
My two antagonists. So
All right.
there was never at any point where they seemed like they were going to win.
What was your Scott?
I gave it a 1. So, having said that, you can roll into the protagonist, the amazing Mark Watney, kicker of Mars's ass.
Yeah, I thought that Damon did a really good job as Mark Watney. He spent a lot of alone on-screen time. He had to chew screen in this.
Sure.
And I
Chew up
thought he did
Red
a
Planet.
really good job. You know, he was just like always positive guy who, you know, he had his moments of doubt for sure, but like even in the book, I kind of thought that he was really positive for a guy who was just stranded on Mars for, what was it, 3 years or whatever it's supposed to be?
Give or take, sure.
Anyway, I liked his character. I thought he was, you know, through the film they did a very good job of doing what they did so well in the book, which was giving him this like witty repartee with himself, basically, and or with the screen that he's talking to the entire time, sure. Like just kind of funny little things. Like I don't know, I like that he was able to stay positive, even though I'm not sure any actual person could stay so positive in such a situation.
Right.
He's the Uber mensch.
Yeah, the Uber astronaut, as I said earlier. Yes, exactly.
Apparently, but yeah, I mean that's.
So you're giving him
mostly
credit.
what I have to say about the protagonist. Does anybody else have anything?
Well,
I agree with that. I like Mark Watney a lot. He seems human to me. He has his weaknesses. He has his moments where he's kind of doubting, but he sees humor in things. And I feel like a person who was less like him had less likelihood of surviving.
Sure.
And I listened to this interview with the author of the book, Andy Weir, and he was talking, he was like, he chose a character like this because he wanted to make it okay to have him explain what he was doing, like the science of it, and make it kind of amusing for people who are reading who weren't necessarily astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, and I got that. So, like, I felt for this character. I really liked him. He seemed like a kind of guy I would really like to know. So, it just seemed to work for me. I liked...
He was a natural character.
Yeah, like it didn't seem like he was too positive because he thought he found enough humor, like dark humor in things that it didn't seem like he was too kind of Pollyanna-ish. I just really liked the character.
Right.
I'm going to right off the bat and say when I found out Matt Damon was cast in this, I was like, that's not who I pictured as Watney. But the movie, I thought, I really can't say more of this. I'm definitely giving it a 1 because Damon did a great job. When he delivered the exposition about the science briefly and humorously, but off the camera, you really got the emotion. I felt he was a really well-rounded character. I credit Matt Damon so much for what he did. I'm definitely giving this a 1.
Right.
I'm giving Matt Damon a 1 because I think that if there
for
was
acting the shit out of this,
if it was a less charismatic actor, I would have found so much fault in the perfection of who the character was. I would have been like, come on, like how can you solve everything perfectly?
You would have thought he was much more obvious Gary Stu, as Steve was saying earlier, if it wasn't Matt Damon.
I like Matt Damon sold it for me.
It's interesting. So I'm going to bring this back to something you said. It's the Harrison Ford effect, I'm going to call it. I can never not see Matt Damon as Matt Damon in any fucking film he's in. So like, he was Matt Damon on Mars and not necessarily Mark Watney. Sure, they can slap that name on him, but he's Matt Damon. So, yes. I mean, that's the way I can't divorce it from that. But given all that, of course, that means he's going to do a good job acting, no matter what character he's playing. So, for all that, I'll have to give him a 1, even though he could be Harrison Ford in the same, in that same sense to me, but still makes it.
I think like that's the kind of character Mark Watney was. Like he could have been played by a younger Harrison Ford.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But like I would have seen them because it's a visual. They're filmizing it for me instead of the character I see in my own head, which I'm trying to ignore and just look at the film. But you have to, pretty much we all did, and I think you have to give him a 1 based on the strength of his actual acting. All right, that brings us to, and we're going on to secondary characters. Beth, you get to speak about them.
I actually liked a lot of the secondary characters. I liked Vincent Kapoor. I liked Mindy. I liked Richard Purnell. I'm not sure I liked Jeff Daniels' character, but as a character he was fine. So I'm giving it a 1.
Okay.
Because there were enough of them that I liked strongly. Overall, than the ones that I was just kind of ambivalent about.
I'm giving it a 1. I love the supporting characters. I think we discussed this before, how many characters there were, and every part that they played in it, I thought they did a great job.
I think that, there were a lot of supporting characters that were interesting to me, and that's what I liked about this. Like, it kind of attacked supporting characters from all angles.
Yeah, I like that. That's well said.
In within the space scenario, I guess.
Sure.
You had, like, the astronauts that were up in space on their way back to Earth. You had all of NASA. You had the Chinese space program that was represented. You had and then within NASA you had all these different conglomerates of people. What was the
Is it the jet propulsion?
Yeah, what was the you remember what the lead guy's name in that was? But anyway, I liked that guy. And
Benedict Wong.
I wish that Donald Glover had been in this film more. or they had like fleshed out his character a little bit, Purnell a little bit more, because
Bruce Singh
was his name.
Bruce Ing.
Okay, yeah, he was good. I wish they had done Purnell a little bit more, just because I like the way that Glover was playing it, but I wish that they had a little more backstory for him.
I feel like if they had given him backstory, it would have been against the character, because he was didn't want anyone in his business.
Yeah, I agree.
That he was just like,
I guess he was more fleshed out in the book version, though. I thought.
Yes, but
Sorry, Ian.
I think they fleshed him out like they did exactly as much as they needed to, no more, no less. Like you got the sense of him, like what they showed you, and there was no need for that, and he served his role perfectly fine. In that
he was
sense.
this crazy eccentric.
There are about 500 one-dimensional characters in this film. It's like they have one peculiarity to them, and then they send them running. I guess that all adds up to an interesting supporting cast, because I'm trying to think of who I'm going to remember from this movie down the line. I'm certainly not going to remember any of the astronauts. I'm not going to be able to differentiate any of them, like character-wise, except for perhaps the commander. Like, you had some of the quirky characters in NASA. I don't like. I might give this a score because, like you were talking about Harrison Ford, that you can't differentiate. I cannot break Jeff Bridges from being Will McAvoy from The Newsroom.
Fair enough.
And so I was watching him. I'm glad that he got promoted from an anchor desk to
director of NASA.
I don't know how that progressed, but I like him as an actor. I like him playing that type of role. So
right. Well, in our grand tradition of deciding this question, pick one that you like the best, and if they did a good job, then it sort of overrides it. Is going to make you give a good score. And I'm going to pick Michael Pena as my one for this. Maybe there's another thing. I can't divorce him from like having recently seen Ant-Man-ish, but he just did a good job. Like, yes, his role was limited. The thing is, because there were so many goons, if you will, if anyone gets that reference. There's so many supporting characters that, they would come and go, so they couldn't devote like that much time to each. Like, they would be shuffling around. Like, even Sean Bean was there, and then he was there for a couple scenes, blah blah blah, and then whoever played the actor's name played Vince, and all that. I agree, like that, like it sort of is overwhelming in a sense. Like you have to try to keep track of them and who they are and what roles they are and what they're trying to argue for and how to rescue Mark. But I think it all was at the end of the day woven together seamlessly enough that I bought it. Like they were people, they were colleagues. Sure, they had their differences with each other, but they still wanted to do one, accomplish one goal.
Scrappy team trying to...
Exactly. That's all fine.
You just mentioned Sean Bean. I think he had the biggest character arc of all the secondary supporting characters.
What was his arc?
His arc was, at first he was like afraid to like talk back, and then he like was like, all right, now I'm going to send them this...
He's playing the role of like the leader of the squad.
The insubordinate guy who's more...
except for at first he was hands off, and then as he grew more frustrated, then he did something about it. Then he got fired. At the end you see him like playing on the playground.
Of the location of the lost...
let's not forget,
he had the actual arc.
He doesn't die.
Yeah, that's the most important thing for the Sean Bean movie, is that Sean Bean does not die.
I guess.
Well, actually, there was a moment in time when at the golf course, I'm like, is he going to have a heart attack? And Andy Weir's like,
well, either way, I think for me it all adds up to
all ones.
A good supporting cast. Yeah, is anyone giving a 0 to secondary?
1.
1.
And we are moving on to dialogue. Chris Morgan, how's the dialogue in this movie?
The dialogue was great. It could have gotten really dry with the exposition. I think we all said that Matt Damon's delivery of the lines, he kept, Mark Watney, the exposition, he kept it interesting, entertaining. I was going to point this out. There's two things. Number one, at the end, I thought they were really good. They set up the thing in space, and they're like, oh, in space. I'm like, it's a Ridley Scott film. Somebody say, no one can hear you scream. And they never did it. I liked it.
It was a good subversion, I
liked
suppose.
It was a nice little tease.
As such. That thought crossed my mind as well when I heard that, yeah.
But what was really cool is when Purnell was, where they had the conference table and Sean Bean's there, and it's like, this is Mission Elrond. And they're like, Elrond? It's like the Council of Elrond.
Well, it's a nerd joke.
It was a total nerd joke, and I really appreciate it because Sean Bean was there. And I thought it was really, I really appreciate those two little.
I suppose
they were nice little winks at the audience, and in a not like Michael Myers where he literally winks at you. Right. Otherwise, I thought they delivered the exposition, everything. This could have been a dry as hell film, and it was done very well. So
it was all fine. Like, so some of the jokes fell flat. Like, yes, while as we just said, Damon did a good job. some of the lines like that were supposed to be funny didn't do it for me. Others were good, and perhaps others that like didn't do for maybe the majority of audiences. I got a little quick kick out of like him dipping his potato in Vicodin or crushed Vicodin. Like that was fine. Like that was a nice little touch. That was funny. And overall, like, yeah, everyone, again, they basically had the conversations needed to have. None of it was ever cringeworthy or approaching it. And while they were slipping in the nationalistic, images / agenda, it was still fine overall. I had no problem with it. Never did I say that was a dumb line or, like, that was, stupid, etc. So I think overall it was fine for me, and I have no complaints about it.
I think that if you take Matt Damon, his part, I enjoy the parts where he's speaking to himself. If you cut that out of the movie, I'd probably give this a very, very strong 0 because I thought that it was the rest of the dialogue was mediocre.
Very short movie.
Yeah, no, you'd be shocked how much of this was not Matt Damon alone. And people, you had the astronauts talking with each other. Anytime the astronauts were speaking, like having dialogue, it was almost cringeworthy. It never was cringeworthy, but it was approaching it. A lot of it was either exposition or kind of flat.
It was flat, yeah, but not cringeworthy. Like, it was a service. Like I said, they're giving you the information you need. Yes, no more, no less. But they're doing what they can with the exposition that they're having to impart.
I was actually going to say a similar thing to what you just said. Like a lot of the Matt Damon dialogue seems kind of, it wasn't cringeworthy ever to me, or even like approaching it, but it was like a lot of it was workmanlike. Like there's nothing really quotable outside of anything that Matt Damon says.
But the thing is, like, I agree with that the flattest dialogue was amongst the astronauts, but I thought on Earth, that with the different characters and the little dialogue, I thought Matt Damon and the Earth people, the people on Earth, the Earth people,
the Martian,
yeah, right. The Earthlings, I thought, they had a lot of exposition to deliver themselves, and I thought they did a good job with that as well.
I thought they did all right, but I don't remember any of the dialogue really, except for like things that Matt Damon said. I
think not so much like one-liners, but when Matt Damon would say something that he figured out on Mars, and then when they were trying to figure out, like when they were in that room with the JPL people. And they would say the same thing that he said. I did enjoy that.
So yeah, that's a nice touch. Yeah, true.
Why there might not have been a lot of dialogue that was maybe quote-worthy outside of Matt Damon's sort of video monologues. Yeah, I did enjoy everything that was said, I guess, in the movie. So I would give it a 1.
Anyone else have anything?
I really like the idea of. I just want to mention this. I really like the idea of like the entire time I was focused on like how long these conversations were actually taking in real time, like in real time between them, because it's like 24-minute turnaround time to like, get a response on anything. So it's like half an hour to say one sentence to each other,
Sure. Yeah.
Like in my mind, I was like, that's kind of a crazy. I mean, that's something to like bring up during dialogue for sure. But anybody else?
I've got one quick thing to say, and we were discussing this earlier. Was how many times they got around saying the word "fuck" in a PG. I think they said it. I think they actually said it twice, and you saw him mouthing it. It was implied. I just hands
I feel like
down.
They said it more than twice.
Hands
I might be wrong.
No, they just.
All right.
So very well, good, like working.
Sure,
fuck
they were
as much as you
they were
can
sneaking fuck under the radar, if you will.
Exactly.
Sure.
They're fucking under the radar.
Good on them.
I'm actually glad you said that. Because I was going to give this a 0, but because they had Matt Damon and because they had that I found that humorous, the fuck parts, I had to give it a 1.
Secondary theme is try to sneak and fuck into a PG-13.
Every time he says that, he tells the director to go have sex with themselves.
Yes, well, I'm giving it a 1 as well. Is anyone not giving it a 1?
I'm going to give it a 1. The old 1 too.
Alrighty. That brings us up to style. Mr. Manzer, your thoughts?
I'm going to be brief because this is getting long. This movie has fantastic shots of Mars. I mentioned this earlier. Makes you want to go to Mars.
Definitely agree.
And I think that if you want to talk about like the cinematography, like they really made me feel like they were shooting on Mars there. And I have to give them full credit for that. Stylistically, a propaganda piece. I'm just gonna leave it at cinematography, and I'm gonna pass it along. Also, I guess the soundtrack was as annoying to me as it was to Matt Damon. So,
well, that's the whole point. They're trying to invoke sympathy.
You mean Mark Watney though? Because Matt Damon might be a big fan of disco.
That's true.
How about this? How about we agree on Matt Watney? So it's both of them.
Okay.
But I absolutely agree. The cinematography of the landscapes of Mars were absolutely beautiful. They looked great. It was very believable, and it's sort of a trademark of Ridley Scott, like huge sweeping shots of a landscape, and I did a good job. No other shots I found jarring or odd or oddly pulled off. So That's basically all I have to say about it.
Yeah, I don't have much to add except for I wanted to mention something about the shots that they had on Earth and like out the windows. They had this like kind of cityscape-ish look, but I don't know what the hell it was about it. But it looked like slightly futuristic.
I don't know what you're talking about, but
when you saw out the window of like all those NASA buildings, it looked like a skyline that was like
in the near future,
really
but not present day. I guess you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know what it was about it, but it didn't look like a modern skyline that you would see out any NASA building window. It kind of looked like the really hopeful future version of like a city, like kind of just cleaned up or whatever it was. But
the world will be so much better when NASA rules.
When NASA takes over
and
rules with an iron
its
fist.
name to Starfleet. And,
I actually believe that's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that, and you know, I always talk about soundtracks, Ian, but I actually like the soundtrack. I'm sorry to break the news to you.
Well, are you
I
talking
don't
about
think
the
much
sound?
of you anyway, so...
No one does.
Distinguish between the musical score and the disco music, the pop music they played when you're talking soundtracks.
I think that's what they mean. It's part of the story, of course, that the music that Watney had to, the only accessible music he had.
I think that added a lot to
it added some humor, some levity.
Lewis's background.
Sure.
And B, I don't know. I just thought it fit well with the cinematography and how they were shooting the film.
Fair enough. So, anyone have any other parting thoughts on the style of this film?
I was going to say Ridley Scott's a great director, and this film is proof positive of it. But I am going to quick mention the score that I can't remember the composer's name, but he reminded me a lot of Jerry Goldsmith. I thought the score was wonderful.
Score? Right.
The actual score I thought was very good.
Fair enough. The atmospheric music, if you will. Alrighty.
So one's all around on that?
It looks like it's all everyone won. And we're finally up to, I get to answer this, our recommendation / overall impression. I liked it well enough. It was funny that, as Ian also happened to him, halfway through I realized that it is indeed a propaganda piece for NASA. But that didn't put me off from it, and everything else I've just said was pulled off perfectly well. Damon did a good job, etc. I would say, is it the greatest Mars space movie I've ever seen? Maybe not, but it's probably up there. It's probably one of the best, robustly done ones, I guess. And
I would
most
challenge
well
you
done.
to choose a better Mars movie.
Total Recall.
Yeah.
Which Total Recall?
The original Total Recall.
I'm gonna grind you up, Quaid. But no, I do. I would recommend it, and I enjoyed it. I guess I had maybe higher expectations of it going in, and I wouldn't say I was disappointed. They just didn't quite meet my expectations, but perhaps they were unfairly high, having said multiple times how we had all read the book, so we had that. That was a story in my mind. But regardless, nevertheless, I think the style carried it a lot, and again, Damon as lead monologuing into a futuristic Mars monitor was all fine. I would say, yeah, check it out. It probably will be on probably many best films of the year-end list. I'll give it a 1.
Yeah, I thought they did a heck of a job on this. I know you said that it slowed down towards the end, Ian, or in your mind.
Not much.
He felt it was dragging a bit.
I thought it was really well paced. It didn't bother me that much, except for I really had to pee towards the end of the movie.
Okay.
Other than that,
that is your problem, sir, not the film's.
Yeah, apparently. You know, I really enjoyed it all the way through. I felt that I was, even though didn't seem like there was so much at stake for this character, and it never really seemed like that, but I was still rooting for him the entire time, and I was being pulled through the movie at like a good pace. I felt like
at a medium pace.
So I definitely would recommend it, and you know, this gets a 1 from me for sure.
Alrighty, Beth.
I definitely recommend the movie, and I give it a 1. I recommend the book first.
Fair enough. As a
I feel
caveat,
like everyone should always read the book, especially this one. It was a very good book. It was very enjoyable, but the movie was also enjoyable. So I give both a 1 with the recommendation that you should read the book first.
All right.
I would say this goes up into the echelon of serious science fiction. I think it was very well done. Beth was telling me to F myself before when I was praising Ridley Scott, and I think that's because of Prometheus.
It was because of Prometheus.
But let's just say Ridley Scott, when he's got good material to work with, he's always a good director, whether or not the materials he's working with is good. So in terms of like the emotional state with the movie, I was very caught up with the emotion that was presented through that with Watney and his crewmates. Yeah, I love this movie. I'd recommend this movie. It's a great movie all around. Yes, it's getting a 1 from me.
I think this is an utterly forgettable movie. I thought it was okay when I went out of it, but am I ever going to watch it again? No. I think that there are many other movies that you should see instead. And to the people at this table who are not Chris,
wrong,
and that Yeah, I feel like you guys are high science fiction people.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yes.
So I think this is more towards Scott and Steve-O. I think that in retrospect, you would have given this a lesser score.
It's possible. You're right about that. I think you made it. I'm not going to change my score, but you made a good point that I enjoyed it while I was seeing it, but am I going to think about it probably not. It'll probably go out of my mind after this. But it was fine.
Would
for
I
what it
rate
was.
it a 10? Would I
Sure.
You didn't.
Yeah, I didn't. But the thing is, do I even consider this when I think of the best movies of all time? This
Why
would
does
not
it matter
even
necessarily whether it's science fiction or not science fiction?
Because I feel that people who appreciate, I know you guys appreciate hard science fiction quite a bit, and I don't. So that colors my perspective. So I think that if you're into hard science fiction, you'll appreciate the technical aspects of this movie and what it's trying to accomplish, versus necessarily the storytelling elements of it.
Well, what I find interesting about the whole MOTS system is you cannot like a movie as, Scott didn't with Wizard of Oz, but still give it a positive score. For me, personally, I would definitely say this is, my top serious science fiction films. I definitely say it was one of the best films I've seen this year, but, still in all, Mad Max is still my number one film of this year.
Fair enough.
And I'm not saying this movie by itself, I'm not mentioning the book, but by itself, there are some flaws in this movie, but overall, I think the positives outweigh the...
On that note, we're going to give the aggregates.
So, final scores stand at... I gave it a 10, actually. Oddly, I guess I didn't think I was going to, but I'll stand by it. Chris, you also gave it a 10, as Beth did as well. Steve-O, you gave it a 9. Ian, curmudgeonly old Uncle Ian, gave it a 6, of course, and that will give us a 9 average.
You kids running around on Mars.
Yeah, well, there's life on Mars, but no room for you, Grandpa. So, I think that'll do.
Oz buying scabs.
I think that'll do it for The Martian. Overall, join NASA and maybe see this movie also.
See you back on Earth.
If you join NASA, that would be great.
Good night.
Join the Chinese Space Agency instead of NASA.
Well,
make it the true red planet.
First, learn what
Donald
they're called.
Trump's coming after you right this second.
yes. We'll join a space agency, and maybe one day you'll have an assist rescuing your opposite nation on Mars. Good night, everyone. This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
This has been a Los Angeles production. All rights reserved.